Hi, I'm Debbie, and this is the now very famous walk-away dress. It's based on an original 1952 dress pattern by Butterick. When they first started producing this, they had to stop producing any other dress patterns because of the demand that they need to fulfill for this one. It's called the walk-away dress because the idea is that you make it in the morning after breakfast and you can walk away with it after lunchtime. It's very, very simple to make. Now, there's a lot of bias binding, so you need to buy about 7 meters. It's got a full skirt. I put a bow on the front, on the pattern. It'll tell you to put poppers on there, but you could put buttons on as well if you wanted to. And it's basically in one piece with a hole in the centre for your head. The front wraps around the back wraps around the front, so it's a complete wraparound dress. Now, before you even open the packet, you'll need to take a look at your sizes, because the measurement, go by your measurements and go by your bust measurements, because they may be different to the dress size that you'd normally buy in a store. For instance, I'd normally buy a size 10 or a size 12 dress. With the pattern, I'm going to make a size 14. So look at your size first of all. On the back of the pattern, you'll find that one half is in English and the second half is in French. But if you want to go by meters and centimeters, look at the French option. If you're a feet and inches kind of girl, then you go for the English section. If you're not too sure whether you go for the bust or the waist or the hip size, go for the bust size, because that's going to be the most difficult area to adjust if you needed to. The waist is going to be the simplest one. So when you've chosen the amount of fabric that you need, and you've bought your fabric and you've bought your bias tape and you've bought your poppers, then let's take a look at the pattern. All of your instructions are included, of course, and this will show you how you're going to lay your pattern out on your fabric and how to make the most of your fabric, because we want to waste as little fabric as we absolutely need to. And it will give you a couple of different options of the width of fabric that you're buying. So take a look again through this before you start to cut out the pattern. What I suggest you do next is to take the tissue patterns and iron them. 2 reasons for that. You will find it easier to cut a straight line when you cut around the edge of the pattern if there's no creases in there, because sometimes these patterns can be very creased when you take them out of the packet. And secondly, if you cut your fabric with a crease in the pattern, then you're not going to cut the right size. You can cut away probably about ½ an inch by mistake if your pattern isn't pressed. So I'm just going to take out all of the pattern pieces. They're quite big. Give them a press, and then we'll come back and have a look at all of the markings on them. I've ironed my pattern pieces, I've got my fabric, and according to my size 14 I need just under 4.5 yards. So now I'm going to cut out my pieces. With the skirt, I'll need to lay that onto the floor because there are 2 very, very big pieces. It actually makes a full circle for the skirt, and you can't cut the skirt by folding your fabric in half because it's too wide. So you need to cut one this way and then one that way onto your fabric. That's all explained in your instructions. When you open up your patterns and you've ironed them, so this is the back for instance, we'll just go through some of the markings. So first of all, there's the dashed lines around the edge of the pattern. You'll notice it says 8, 10, 12, 14, so I've got the smallest pattern here. So I need to cut around the size 14 mark, which is the largest one. They've all got different sizes of dashes and lines as well, so it makes it easier to follow when the lines get close together. On this part here, this is a dart. So you'll need to transfer these dots onto your fabric when you cut the pattern out. Different ways you can do that. You can either pin straight through. I like to use an erasable marker pen. I just find it easier. Or you can do a tailor's tack, which is basically threading through with a hand needle a few stitches, then cutting them off in the middle so it leaves the tufts of thread. On this section, and there's one of these on the back, there's also one on the front, on the long piece of fabric. This is where if you need to lengthen or shorten the body, you're going to do it. So if you're not too sure, if the measurements don't add up to your measurements, the easiest thing to do would be to make a toile, which is basically a rough dress made up from something like an old sheet or calico or cheap fabric. To lengthen, you'll cut along this line. Measure as much as you need to lengthen. You've got lots of spare tissue paper around here, so cut a strip of the tissue paper and then just tape it in to make that longer. If you're going to shorten, then you can simply fold over at that same point and put some tape on there to shorten. And again, that's the same on the front piece. Now on the back that I have here, it also says place on fold, and it'll tell you how many pieces you're going to cut. So to save time cutting the pattern and then cutting all over again with the fabric, wherever I can, I'll try and do both together at the same time. So my fabric's folded in half. I'm placing my pattern where it says against the fold, Pop a few pins in. Try and keep your pattern and your fabric as flat as you can. Make sure that lines up perfectly with the fold. And we're going to cut. Now when you come to these little points here, you can see we've got V shapes. There's no need to actually cut out the complete V. I'll just turn this around and show you. Just make a little snip into the fabric. So there's my size 14 line. All I'm going to do is make a little nick, like so. This is across the shoulder. There'll be a part on the shoulder that joins this, so this is the front of the dress. And when I cut this out and start piecing it together, those two little triangles will meet up. So when the pattern's not on my fabric anymore, I know where they should line up because of that little nick. And you'll see these all around the dress. So you'll see them on the skirt, where the skirt matches up with the back. And that's just to help you to make sure that, that everything's being pieced together. So I'll carry on snipping away and cutting out all of the rest of my pattern pieces. And then we'll start sewing it together. Just snipping in those little V shapes again. You can actually see the size of this skirt. This is 2 pieces faced together. I'll take the pins out, and to join them we're going to join down the centre back. It actually says on your pattern 1/2 is the centre back and 1/2 is the centre front, because where this goes around your waist it's not perfectly symmetrical. It's slightly wider on the back side. So that I know which side that is, I'm going to pin those 2 pieces together. And then when I take the pattern pieces off, over you go. Save this because you can make more dresses from it. I'm just going to sew a straight line down here. And have a look on your pattern again. It will tell you in centimetres and in inches your seam allowance. It's normally 5/8 of an inch. So I'll do that in just one second. I just wanted to show you also, this is the back section. So this is the one that I cut on the fold. I like to leave my pattern pieces attached to the dress pieces. There's only 4 on this pattern, so you're not going to get confused as to which piece is which, but don't take the pattern off until you actually need to sew that together. And what I've done with the markings for the dart is simply hold on there, straight through the tissue paper, straight into the paper, an air erasable pen, into the fabric, sorry, and that's marked all the way through both sides. That will disappear after around about 24 hours, depending on how much ink you've actually put on there. Don't iron it though if you're going to use a water or an air erasable pen, because it'll make it permanent. If you use a friction pen, that's different, because that disappears when you iron it, or as I said earlier, you could pin that in place. So I'm going to put the back to one side for now. The next thing to do is to sew straight down. Then the back is going to join to the big skirt there, and then both pieces join together over the shoulder, so it's actually quite simple to piece together. But we'll do this bit first. So that's my centre seam at the back of the skirt, and I've pressed the seam open. Next thing to do just before we start to construct the whole thing is to put the darts in. So I'll put my skirt to one side for just now, and put the darts in the back here. So I'm simply going to pinch together the marks that I've made, like so, up to the point, and I'm going to sew starting from the edge of the fabric in a straight line. You can mark that if you wanted to with a ruler and come off at the end here, try not to make that too pointy because that's going to make it stick out. So try and keep that a nice smooth line as you come off. When you've finished sewing, take the 2 pieces of thread and tie them in a knot to stop them coming undone. And I'll do the same with the other side, and then the darts in the front of the dress as well. So there's my 2 darts in the back of the top section of the dress. And this is how I do the darts in the front section of the dress. So this is the bit that looks a little bit like an apron. There's 2 darts on either side. So I've put my dots where the marks are going to go. One of them goes like that down the waist from just under the arm, and the other one goes across to the bust here. So for the bust one, when you fold like this, those 2 sides line up, and you'll need to sew across to where the point is here. So that's from where the join is there, and sew straight across. And the second one, on the size 14 that I'm making, comes from right at that point. That point may be in a different area if you're making a different size of dress. But basically what I'm going to do there is to sew, or fold these in half, and then we'll sew to join all those dots together, like so. You don't have to draw that on there, I just thought it to give you an idea of how we're going to do the dart. So again, top and bottom, pinch those together and pin them so both sides meet up. And I've already done the one on this side to show you. So I've got 1 dart down here, 1 dart under the arm, but the actual shape of the arm from the right side is smooth. So it may look a little bit funny on your pattern where you have like a triangle sticking out, but that does actually line up here. Now it's up to you whether you want to leave the darts flattened like this and just press the darts away from you, or you could open that up and press the darts open. Personally, I'd keep them as they are and just press them away. So I'll just sew the other darts here, and then we'll start to construct the dress. Right, so that's the top of the back sewn to the skirt. You need quite a big area to lay all of this out to see how it's working. But you can see it coming together nicely. The next thing I'm going to do is to join the front to the back. So basically the whole dress is one really long piece, and you're left with a hole in the middle to pop your head in. So I'll do this right sides together, like so. And literally we're just going to sew across the top of both of the shoulder pieces like so. Like that. So we'll have a few pins in. I'll sew those up and then I'll give it a press. Right, so that's where we are now. This is the back of the dress. So this is the one with the full skirt that wraps all the way around to the front, and this is where it joins at the front. And that's the front of the dress that I've got down the other side. We're going to hem next. So it's quite difficult if you've not done it before, hemming around a curved hem, because it has a tendency to pucker up. So don't go down the straight sides. Find the end of the curve of the hem at the bottom, because all of the rest of this is going to be finished with bias tape. I like to fold over twice, but keep that hem as small as you can. So if I can keep that to about 1/4 inch, that means that there's not so much fabric going inside here. When you think about it, where you're hemming to is a smaller size than the edge of the fabric, because it's a circle. So if you've got a big hem and you're trying to fold that over twice, it's going to pucker up all the way around because there's so much fabric you're trying to get in there. So try and keep that quite small. So fold over twice. I'm not going to worry about pinning this one, but do if you feel more confident, and just go all the way around. Ease it a little bit, which means give it a bit of a pull, because it's a semicircular skirt, or a circular skirt, sorry. It's going to be cut on the bias, so it will pull a little bit. And if you do get any puckering on the inside, don't worry about it, because when you press it, they will all disappear. So let's just take this to the machine. This is quite time consuming, so you go and put the kettle on, and I'll just sew all the way around the hem. This is my bias tape. I find the easiest way to apply this, because there's so much to put on the dress, is to buy pre-bought bias tape, fold it in half, and I've already pressed it. and that means that when I put it onto my dress, and this is down the side of the back panel, which in effect fastens at the front, I can wrap that around both sides and sew both together at the same time. When I get to the other end, and this is the end where I've already hemmed, I'm going to fold the bias tape inwards so it makes a nice neat finish. So we're nearly finished. I just wanted to show you, before I finish the bias tape, how I'm going to put the buttons and the buttonholes on. So this part is the front of the dress, so when that wraps around it's going to sit in the middle of my back. I've left the bias tape extended. I'll fold the end over, then over again to make that neat, and then sew all the way along here, and then this is going to wrap around and I'll machine sew that just into the back of the bias tape. And then on the opposite side, that's where my button will go, so that's how it fastens at the back. With the back of the dress, which wraps around to the front, on your pattern it'll tell you how to sew on 3 poppers. So you prested those bits together, and then there's 3 faux buttons sewn on the top. Now this is the back of the dress. This is the part that wraps around to the front and fastens in the centre. On your pattern it'll tell you to sew on 3 poppers and then like a faux button on the top to decorate it. I'm not going to do that. This is what they did in the sewing bee, was actually to sew 3 loops so it's the buttons that actually fasten it, not the poppers. So I'm going to make my loops out of bias tape. So I'll cut these to about 4 inches long. Fold in the ends, both ends, fold in half, and then sew down the side. So you've got a little loop like this, which I'm going to sew on the back of the bias tape, fold it over like so, and that's where my buttons are going to go. So I'll have 3 actual buttons at the front, like this. Where the bias tape comes down to the hem of the dress to make that neat, remember I've sewn my tape on in 1 because it's been folded in half. Before I come right down to the end, I'm going to fold over the end of the tape and then fold it around again and then machine stitch over the top. If there's a gap at the bottom here, if you wanted to, you could sew that by hand.